Okay, if you're following along with us doing this study, then I'm going to keep going on to chapter 3 of the study. It's called The Least of These. And so now we see that Naomi has resolved in her heart that she wants to go home to Bethlehem, but she kind of has a little bit of a problem. And we would never normally call Ruth baggage, but truth be told, Naomi has a little bit of baggage before she can go back to Bethlehem, and that is in the form of her daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. And so she actually tells the two girls, don't come back with me. Stay here with your families. Obviously, they've grown up in Moab. They are daughters of Moab. And so they've got families, they've got friends, they've got loved ones, they've got a whole life. They have grown up to worship Chemosh, who was the god of Moab. Chemosh was a cruel god. He loved, to worship Chemosh included prostitution and immorality, and he's just a vile god. And so Naomi says to her daughters-in-law, don't go with me. Stay here with your families. Start a new life. Basically, that's what she's telling them. My sons are dead. I don't want you to owe me anything. So start a new life. And Orpah returns to her family. We never hear about Orpah again. But Ruth pledges her allegiance not just to Naomi, but to God. And I love this verse. I think many of us would be familiar with this verse. It's chapter 1, verse 16. And Ruth says to her, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. This is quite a remarkable statement for Ruth to make. And in many ways, this is her conversion moment. All of us come to a place in our lives where we are drawn to a point of decision, where we follow after God or we turn back to our normal and our old way of life. And so this is very much the crossroads for Ruth, and she pledges her allegiance to Naomi and to God, and she journeys with Naomi back to Israel. The crazy thing about this is I can't help but wonder, what was it about God that drew Ruth to this God that she didn't know about? She would have been raised in Moab. They would not have spoken about Yahweh. They wouldn't have, learned about him, his characteristics, his nature, his heart, his love towards his people. So I wonder what it was about Naomi that drew Ruth to God. I can't help but wonder that even while she was in Moab, Naomi's devotion to God was clear and evident to the people around her. And it makes me go and question whether my devotion to God, not that I am devoted to him so that others see and are amazed by my relationship with God, but I wonder if people are drawn to God because of my devotion to him. I hope that if people meet me and know me and get to know me, that it causes them to want to draw closer to Jesus. That is the goal for me. I want people to feel Jesus in a conversation with me. I want people to feel his love just by observing my life. Now, I know that I am probably nowhere close to that, but I'm definitely on a journey. And I can't help but just think that I wonder if there were days where Naomi was praying to her God and crying to him, and Ruth just kind of happened to notice and see that there was this God that you could be so real and close with. And I can't help but think that that would have just been so encouraging to Ruth. And, I don't know about you, but if you've grown up in a religion where God is distant and cold and angry, and, all I do is to try and please him, and there's no guarantee that I'm even going to do that, to now all of a sudden be shown that there's this God who actually cares more about relationship than the rules. I don't know about you, but I would definitely be interested in this. And so here we see Naomi and Ruth, and they are embarking on this journey back to Bethlehem, which for both of them is such an incredibly brave thing for them to do. In that society, in this culture, I mentioned previously that women were not necessarily regarded as anything spectacular or special. So both Ruth and Naomi, being that they are women, would not have been eligible to own land. Now, we read later in the story of Ruth that Elimelech Naomi's husband, had actually owned land, but he had relinquished his land when he left Bethlehem. So Naomi and Ruth go back. They would not have had land. Widowhood, for which both of them were widows, was seen to be something that was shameful. What did your husband do that caused him to die so young? So I can't even imagine, what Naomi and Ruth would have had to have gone through when they decided to move their lives back to Bethlehem. Ruth was a Moabitess, and I've spoken about this before. The Moabites were considered a cursed people. So not only was she a foreigner, but she would have been looked down upon by the Israelites. 100%. Both Ruth and Naomi had nothing going for them at this point when they made the decision to go back to Bethlehem. They would have been absolutely and solely dependent on a male heir from Naomi's family or from Elimelech's family that may or may not show kindness towards them. So together, Naomi and Ruth represent two of the three people groups that are so dear to the heart of God. In Exodus 22, and as God is establishing the law, he says this to the children of Israel: "Do not mistreat or oppress foreigners, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do, and they cry out, I will certainly hear their cry, and my anger will be aroused." God cares so much for the disadvantaged and the disenfranchised in our society. This is the heart and the character of God since he established the law, was that his heart was inclined towards the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner. And I do not believe for one moment that God's heart has changed in this regard. I believe that God's heart is still very much for those who are oppressed, those who are marginalized, those who are looked down upon, those who quite literally might be orphans and widows, but even in a spiritual sense, for those people who we might just kind of brush off to the side. It takes more work to look after them than to actually engage. So we'll just put them over there on the side. God's heart is towards those people. So I wonder, in your life, who represents this group of people? Are there people in your world that are a little bit less fortunate? Are there people in your world who fall into this category or one of these categories? Do you have widows in your world? Are there people in your life that have lost their husband, lost their loved one, lost their stability that you can actually stand alongside with? Are there people in your world that have no parents? Are there young children that have no father or mother figure to look up to, whether physical or spiritual, that you can actually stand in the gap? And are there people in your world who are foreign? Are there people in your world that are maybe strangers to your society, to your culture, that you can actually come alongside and love? But I guarantee that there's people for all of us that we can actually love a little bit more. And so I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to look out for those who actually need a little bit of extra love. Look out for those who are maybe lonely. Look out for those who have been marginalized. And let's see how we can actually be the hands and feet of Jesus to these people groups. Just how Ruth and Naomi would have now been at the mercy of other people. I wonder who's at the mercy of my kindness. Who is it that my kindness, my words of encouragement, my resources, my generosity can actually bless in significant ways?